Добрий день.
Добрий день.
Доброго дня всім учасникам. Вас сьогодні вітають Американські ради з міжнародної освіти і також наш проект «Ініціатива з академічної доброчесності та якості освіти». І сьогодні ми вас усіх запрошуємо на нашу подію, вебінар «Спартанці, науки, інтервенція академічної доброчесності». І у нас сьогодні є двоє представників на цій події. Це Джейк Каспер, який є фахівцем з питань академічної доброчесності у деканаті по роботі зі студентами Університету штату Мічиган. Дуже попросимо всіх учасників себе зам'ючувати. Так, оскільки нас сьогодні буде багато людей на цій події. І також другий представник – це Брендон Арнолд, який працює координатором програм по роботі з новими студентами в Офісі програм для нових студентів та сімей Темпльського університету. Ми вітаємо наших спікерів і також вітаємо усіх учасників. Наша подія буде відбуватися англійською мовою і синхронним перекладом від пані Інни Деркач. Тому, якщо вам потрібен переклад, будь ласка, у Zoom, де у вас написано переклад або англійською мовою interpretation, оберіть португальську мову. Насправді це буде канал для української мови. Якщо ж ви достатньо володієте рівнем англійської мови, то можете обирати канал англійської мови, ви чутимете оригінальну доріжку. Також під час вебінару ми вас заохочуємо давати свої запитання, ставити їх у чаті, ми їх передамо спікерам. І ми знаємо, що багато хто з вас, хто вже реєструвався, також залишав свої запитання, ми їх постараємося озвучити і також отримати на них відповіді. Не знаю, чи я представилася, мене звати Марта Томахів, я працюю старшою фахівчиною проєкту «Ініціатива академічної доброчесності та якості освіти». І сьогодні зі мною мої колеги Женя Москалевич і також Анастасія Сидорук, і ми будемо з вами працювати. Тому, якщо у вас виникнуть якісь запитання під час події, звертайтеся або безпосередньо у чат, або до когось із нас у приват. Так, я думаю, ми можемо розпочинати. And Brandon and Jake, I think we can start and give the floor to you.
Hi there. Just want to make sure we're coming through clear. Everything good? Wonderful. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for this opportunity. We hope that you and your family and your friends are doing well during these really difficult times. We're just excited to talk about academic integrity and what we can do to uphold integrity with our students in the higher education realm. But first, always just want to start with a greeting from America here, and we're just so glad to be a part of this dialogue and this conversation with you all. So I will go ahead and hopefully you all should still see the screen. That's correct. We will be talking about scholarly Spartans and academic integrity intervention. Let me just start first with an introduction of myself. I'm Jake Kасper, and I've been working in higher education, student conduct, disciplinary work for close to 15 years, specifically ranging from academic integrity to different violations such as alcohol, drug use, or other violations that may occur on campus. Those kind of works that I've been doing for almost 15 years. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Brandon Arnold, who's going to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Arnold. I am the new student programs coordinator at Temple University, but did my master's work at Michigan State University, where I served as a graduate assistant in the Dean of Students office, which is where I worked with Jake on developing scholarly Spartans. I'm really excited to be here with you all this afternoon. Thanks for having us.
So at this point, we're going to start with our MSU, our university land acknowledgements. And this is something that we take the opportunity to honor those that have been on our grounds before we got here. Really just the tribal peoples that were here before us. So I'm going to read this. Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize Michigan's 12 federally recognized Native nations, historic indigenous communities in Michigan, indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences.
I would like to offer the Temple University land acknowledgement. We are located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we acknowledge the land on which we sit and occupy today as the traditional and ancestral home of the Lenape and other indigenous nations of the Schuylkill and Delaware River. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering and to this dialogue. We take this opportunity to thank and honor the original caretakers of this land. We additionally acknowledge the African I think I accidentally was muted. I'm going to try that again. So I would like to offer the Temple University land acknowledgement. We are located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we acknowledge the land on which we sit and occupy today as the traditional and ancestral home of Lenape and other indigenous nations of the Schuylkill and Delaware River. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering and to this dialogue. We take this opportunity to thank and honor the original caretakers of this land. We additionally acknowledge the African ancestors that were enslaved and utilized to build upon the land taken from indigenous nations. So for our time together this afternoon, we want to share what our learning outcomes are. So as a result of attending this session, we hope that you all will be able to recognize some of the unique characteristics of the Michigan State University Integrity of Scholarships and Grades policy. Then we're going to describe the Scholarly Spartans academic integrity course learning outcomes and discuss how these closely interact with the scholarship and grades policy. We want to discuss the process of creating an online intervention course and discuss the transferable aspects of the MSU academic integrity process to your institution as folks are looking to create different ways to address academic integrity issues.
Clear for those that are attending here, while Brandon and I are participating from the Michigan University, there's certainly always opportunities for individuals to incorporate and use in their own spaces, though. I do want to clarify, though, that Brandon is speaking from his experience at Michigan State University, not so much on the Temple University piece, but we're very excited that Brandon's at Temple University and has a different university perspective, but it won't be specific to academic integrity. That our experiences today that we'll be speaking about are specific to Michigan State University, which is in East Lansing, Michigan. So our time today, though, this is our agenda here. Our plan is to spend about an hour going through our slides here and our information that we want to share with you about our academic integrity process. How do we manage the intervention, and then how do we develop the new academic integrity intervention? This is something that Brandon is worked incredibly hard on the past couple of years now, almost. Yeah, a couple of years, Brandon, working on a new way of doing academic integrity. And then we will certainly take questions and answers if there are any burning questions. So please do feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll leave it to Marta and her team to, interrupt and let us know if we should answer something quickly or if we can save it for the end there. But we would welcome all the questions that you have, and we can dive into those. So, all right, without further ado, we'll go ahead and roll in here. With the first part of academic integrity, I think it's important to kind of give a landscape of how we manage academic integrity. So at Michigan State University, we have over 50,000 students that attend our university. Some are online, some are remote, some are in the different campuses that we have, and that is including both graduate students and undergraduate students. At Michigan State University, we have a policy called the Integrity of Scholarship and Grades. That policy requires all faculty members who submit any penalty grades for academic misconduct. It requires all those faculty members to submit an academic dishonesty report. We use the acronym ADR. So if you hear me use the word ADR, the acronym ADR, you'll understand what I'm referring to is if a faculty member accuses a student of cheating or of plagiarism or of falsifying data or misusing information, using the online resources while taking an exam, if they do penalize the students, meaning that they will fail them for the course, or they give them a 0 on the assignment or whatever that may be, the faculty member is required to submit an academic dishonesty report according to this policy. So when the faculty member does submit an academic dishonesty report, they serve as a complainant. So initially, when they file this report, faculty member with their academic freedom have already made the finding that a student is responsible for violating the policy. This is really important though, because this is why we require the online report, because it offers a due process for students. So this gives students the opportunity to request a hearing, to say, wait a second, I didn't violate the policy. I am being honest about my work. I am being forthright about the work that I've done and the information that I've shared. And so that's just really critical to know that when they submit a report, this starts a hearing process or a due process for the students. So then for first time, according to this policy that we have, this Integrity of Scholarship and Grades policy, students are required to take an online course through D2L platform. This is similar to the Canvas platform that you all may be using, or the classroom platform. Brandon has really spent so much time working on creating this online course free of charge for the students. But if a student is found responsible, they are required to take this online course, which Brandon will be going into. And this is a self-paced course for students to take. And if they complete this course successfully, and if they graduate with only one ADR, one academic dishonesty report on their record, we will, as a university, delete it from their history. So it's not going to be something that would follow them in their careers. It's something that we would maintain at the university. And if they, again, pass the online course, the intervention course, and they have no other issues, no other academic issues, we will delete it upon their graduation. And that's the use of the expungement process. If there are multiple issues, multiple incidents, and this is kind of the caveat, I'll say, is if there's multiple issues, or if it's a very egregious situation, for example, would be if a student pays another student to complete their work for them, or if a student cheats on their comps, those are very egregious offenses, then that would lead to the university colleges would then request an additional sanction, something that would be more severe than taking the online course for the students. So that's kind of how nuts and bolts, how the process works at MSU. Certainly there's a lot of nuances to that, but ultimately we're trying to provide due process for a student and making sure that they have their rights and that we are honoring their voices as well. So you can kind of see this is our flow chart here that I just kind of described, explained. So if there's an academic disciplinary record, and that's the first box there, if it's the first offense, they take the online intervention course, or if it's a multiple offenses or egregious, they would go through a disciplinary process with our office. DOSO, you can see in that second box on the right there, stands for the Dean of Students Office at the University, at Michigan State University. So that's something that, again, if a student is requested by the college dean to have additional sanctions or something that's more egregious, they would go through the process with our office, face to face, not just taking the online intervention course. So, and then you can kind of see the process here, how students can accept responsibility, deny responsibility, and if they deny responsibility, they can have a hearing where the faculty member, the burden of proof is on the faculty member. And we use the burden of proof, and I don't know what they would call it elsewhere, but in America, we call it the preponderance of the evidence. More likely than not, did this occur? So it's not a beyond reasonable doubt standard, but it's a more likely than not, it's an administrative educational standard of did this actually occur? And then I think for many universities and schools, we've seen with this shift, this pivot to online learning, we've seen a rise in academic integrity cases here. So you can see in academic year 2019-2020, we've almost doubled our disciplinary reports that were submitted. And then this past year, we've come down a little bit as students have come online and more education has been given to our students at the university for academic integrity and academic honesty. So we're glad to see that the numbers have come down a little bit from the peak that you see there, from about 200 to 1,000. Then you can see that significant rise from 2009 all the way to 2020. One thing that we've learned too, and Brandon and I will talk a little more about this too, is we as a university, we as higher education officials, we are facing, I think, a pandemic, if you will, of, forgive me for using pandemic, but a pandemic of academic integrity and the challenges there. I think a lot of that has to do with technology. I think we're only going to see these numbers increase over time as technology continues to grow. And, I think as educators and as people that are aging, we're always going to be behind the generation in front of us when it comes to technology, because technology is it speeds things up and really does make things challenging. So how do we work with our students to help motivate them intrinsically to learn, to desire to learn, not just to get a grade or passing marks or to be successful in their career, but really to learn, to be passionate about learning and pursuing their education with a positive and more holistic approach to their intake. And then again, here's another number. If you look at the calendar year of ADR comparisons, these numbers are what's out there. Another point I'd like to say is these are the ones that have been noted. These are the ones that have actually been cited and found. We know also faculty members are not all catching everything, and I don't mean catching as in a bad way, but they're not monitoring or seeing how our students may be cheating or plagiarizing, how not all faculty members do report what happens in their classrooms. Not all faculty members, even with the policy that says you must do this, not all of them are looking for it or trying to detect things. So I do feel personally, professionally, these numbers are very small compared to what might actually be the numbers at our university and universities worldwide. So and I think the data and the reports do show that. So those are things that we need to be mindful of as well. And then at MSU, and I call it MSU, Michigan State University, this was from fall 2020, and again, just the beginning of the pandemic, or I guess in the beginning, we're right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're looking at almost a split between plagiarism and cheating. And we define plagiarism more of the miscitation or the inappropriate citation towards other works and using other people's work as their own. And then cheating as in working with classmates or inappropriate use of information during examinations. All right, Brandon.
Yeah, Jake, before we sort of slide over to talk about the development, there was a question in the chat. What is the students' perception of such a strict policy on cheating? Do they like it, support, or resist it?
I think that's a very good question. I think, to be honest, most students that I talk to like the policy because it does, it supports the, there's multiple reasons to that and why I say that, because many of the students that I talk to really appreciate this as a form of protecting the name of their university and protecting the integrity of their degree. The way that a lot of students look at this is if I graduate and know that all of my classmates have cheated and not learned their information, it's going to hurt them when they get to their career and into the workforce. So that's one thing that I think students really like about this policy. The second thing, though, is I really do think that students love the fact that this is educational. For that first offense, if a faculty member says, you forgot to put a citation in there, use the appropriate attribution, or you were not allowed to work with your classmate on this element, they can see this as educational rather than punitive, because it does go off of their record if nothing else happens. And so that's something that they appreciate, the fact that this is, yes, strict, but also make sure that we are keeping the integrity of it. The third reason that I found that the students really like this policy is they feel like other people are cheating, so I'm at a disadvantage. And this policy, I think, really helps lay the level playing field for all students, and that even though, and maybe it's an equity issue, to make it equal, to make sure that some of them maybe can afford a tutor to take their homework for them, whereas others don't, and they can't afford it, and it's a cost of living, and they're unable to do that. And so they view this policy as a way of really making sure that there is integrity, not only to the degree, but also at the university. That's a great question, though. I hope that I answered that. We can certainly tackle that as we get there, as we get to the Q&A as well, but that's a great question. Brandon, would you add anything else to that?
I think the one thing that I would add is often students come to us and sort of explain, I didn't realize that this was plagiarism or that this was cheating. We often have some of the egregious academic dishonesty reports, but a lot of times it comes from a place that our high school preparation programs heading into Michigan State don't actively talk about academic integrity in the way that we would maybe hope that they would. So it's now giving us an opportunity to do some thoughtful education around what academic integrity is and why it's important to our university that wouldn't exist with a policy that kept a marker on a student's record for the duration of their time. So just to recap, as we're moving into this second part, we're going to discuss the academic integrity intervention, which is called Scholarly Spartans. We are the Michigan State University Spartans. This is the course that students are assigned to by our office, the Dean of Students Office, once Jake has received an academic dishonesty report. This course is free for all students to take once they have been referred to our office. It is housed within Desire to Learn, which is our online asynchronous learning management platform similar to Canvas or Google Classroom. Iterations of this course have existed since 2009, but we've been actively trying to develop new ways to keep the course relevant and to address some of the larger trends that we're seeing, especially now that there is this large uptick in academic dishonesty reports since we've been in the virtual environment. What we're going to talk about today is the newest iteration. This is the iteration that we have launched this semester as a pilot program in order to start seeing if, the theories and different examples that we've used to reshape this course are hopefully being as effective as we believe that they will be. We're going to share some qualitative data from the course to see what students are sharing about their experience. But just so you all know, the course is intentionally made to be relatively rigorous. So it should take students about 3 to 5 hours in order to go through all of the different modules, do the reflection. But they're given 4 weeks in order to complete it and can do it entirely self-paced. So the development of Scholarly Spartans started with developing learning outcomes. We went to the Council for the Advancement of Standards and looked at the CAS standards for student conduct and community standards. From there, we started to look at the main areas we wanted students to be able to learn about academic dishonesty and their own decision-making processes. We developed 4 main areas. So we wanted students to be able to learn, to reflect, to repair, and to apply. So as a result of learning, we wanted students to be able to articulate policies, processes, and procedures that were related to the academic integrity and misconduct process at Michigan State. So that would help to lay the foundation of this is what our standards are here for you as a student. The second bucket is reflect. So we wanted students to think about the decisions and how they aligned with their personal values and future goals. So we often talk about this idea of intent versus impact, whether or not students were intentionally trying to cheat the system or not, there's still an impact on our larger university name and on their personal values. We wanted them to be able to think through that. For repair, we wanted students to be able to describe the influence of their behavior and how they might be able to address the harm. So we often would hear from students when we would ask the question, what harm would this create? They would talk about the value of their degree from Michigan State University and how if they continued to cheat their way through the system, it would devalue that degree. So we wanted them to think about what are ways that you can maybe educate other students about academic integrity, since this is a theme that they may not have been exposed to prior. And then lastly, our final bucket was apply. So we wanted students to implement the knowledge acquired from their process into their everyday lives. So you'll see that there is an emphasis in our online module about academic integrity, but also what integrity means generally. How do you embody integrity and make good decisions for yourself and for those around you in your everyday life? So the course addresses all of these, but we really wanted to focus on reflect and apply, knowing that this is an opportunity to figure out how students should be moving forward from their violation. We focused on the reflect and apply pieces.
One piece I wanted to add to that too, just to kind of clarify more on the CAS standards. This is a American-based set of standards for higher education and the CAS standards, and this is something that I would encourage anyone, regardless of where you're at. You know, what are the standards for your higher education systems, and what are the standards for your university setup, whether it's with academic integrity and really just trying to be in sync or in compliance with those standards to make sure that what are the best practices and how are you determining your learning outcomes to mesh with those best practices as well.
So our next step after developing the learning outcomes was looking at some of the best practices in the literature. So to share a little bit more to what Jake was just talking about, we looked specifically at some of the US trends in the US policies and literature that was focused on the US. But I think a lot of these kind of cross-cultural norms can be applied throughout different iterations and students generally. But first, we wanted to look at student development, academic integrity, giving credit, ethical approaches in decision-making, and refocusing on the future. So there was an online course for students addressing academic dishonesty that was created by Roberts and Haiju in 2009. So this focus helped give us some validation that it is possible to create an online course that is effective for students. As we started to create the actual content, we looked at a dissertation that was created by a doctoral student at Michigan State University who addressed that there is a unique need for helping international students to understand what academic dishonesty is because of the drastic cultural differences around academic integrity. So we worked pretty closely with our colleagues in the Office of Education Abroad to better understand how in some cultures, sharing information and sharing your resources or your answers is actually encouraged. There's more of a communal aspect to it than maybe the individualization or individualized nature that we often think about in the United States. That dissertation also focused on the fact that students who are extrinsically motivated are more likely to cheat. So we wanted to develop content that would help students to be thinking about what their goals are and what some of those internal measures of success for them are so that they could work towards those as opposed to thinking about the extrinsic measures such as just getting the grade or just getting the piece done so that they could get their degree and make money and some of those like larger pieces. To talk just a little bit more about the academic integrity across culture, we wanted to use a restorative approach. So Jake will likely talk just a little bit about our restorative justice model, but we wanted to acknowledge there is this social construct that requires specific training. All right. So we used a theoretical framework. And the theoretical framework that our course is rooted in was developed at Kansas State University. And it's a model developed for creating a culture of academic honesty. And there involves 3 components. So we hope students will know the self, they'll know the policy, and they'll know the community. So it's adapted for the course and overlaps with our learning outcomes. Now we're really going to get to my favorite part, which is the actual modules. What are we teaching the students? What are we hoping that they will gain from it? So we created 6 modules, taking all of those learning outcomes and all of the models in the literature that we just discussed and broke it down. So module 1 is called I'm a Scholar and a Spartan. We're going to give examples of each of the modules in the content that it's created in just a moment. But module 1 helps to lay the foundation of what it means to be somebody who is a learner and who's a part of a larger community. We see that there's a great amount of school pride in being a Spartan, so we wanted to tap into that. Second, we have cheating, collaboration, and coding, oh my. So this focuses on the foundation of introducing students to what academic integrity is, what we as Michigan State University define academic dishonesty as, and giving examples of cheating, improper collaboration, and coding issues. So for coding issues, we mean specifically students who are maybe in computer science, who are often taught about the nature of communally sharing shared code, but that may not be the expectation of the professors. Module 3 continues to build upon Module 2, but focuses specifically on plagiarism. So giving credit where credit is due and how to appropriately cite the information that you are looking to provide. Module 4 takes a larger global look at integrity in society and gives relevant US-based examples of when integrity, not just academic integrity, but what we refer to as kind of capital I, big integrity, shows up in media examples that students are often seeing on social media or on the news or in conversations with their friends. Then going down and drilling a little bit more into their personal self, we wanted them to know what they value, so how their values align with their decision-making process. And then in Module 6, we've called it It Won't Happen Again. This is where we tap into a lot of the restorative pieces, but encourage students to develop a plan to move forward so that they can specifically address the concerns or factors that may have led to the decision to cheat or to plagiarize, so that they can, make a different decision the next time they're faced with a challenge. And then we have 6 quizzes and 6 activities. In order to pass the course, they must get an 80% on all quizzes and submit all of the activities. Before we hop into sharing more about the specific modules, Jake, is there anything else you wanted to add about the kind of overview of the course?
Oh, that was an excellent overview there.
All right, so I will quickly highlight a little bit more about Module 1. So tapping into this idea of being both a scholar and a Spartan, we used our institution's kind of motto, who will, Spartans will, which is our call to action in order to encourage students to recognize that they have the power to make the world a better place. So each of the modules includes some type of external video or PDF content that we were able to gather from the internet and cite appropriately, of course, as it is an academic integrity course. So the middle image gives a little bit of insight into the branding. So we have our Michigan State bell tower with the Spartan head, and then underneath there's a video that leads into a brief recorded PowerPoint that highlights what they are going to be accomplishing for that particular module. That model of having the image with the video to start is something that is used in every single module. We thought that it would help humanize the presentation so that students could hear a voice and be able to recognize that this is not just a course that they should be kind of clicking through, that there are people who are putting in time to help them, and that there are resources within the Dean of Students office.
It's a really cool thing I want to say about the voices too, is we've used students and we've asked students that have gone through the process if they would do the recording with their voices. And so it's really kind of cool. And this goes to the restorative justice lens that Brandon referenced earlier. It's just how do we, it's not punishment, but it's about restoring the students back into our community and restoring students back into our world in academics. So it's kind of cool to give students the opportunity to be a part of this course after they've been found responsible, you know, and it gives them that autonomy to contribute back. And that's kind of a cool piece there too, is and every single video that we have, it's going to be a voice of a student that's been through it. We keep that all private as well. We don't say who it is, but we use their voice and they're happy to share that. So that's great too. Brandon, are you good with this slide?
Yep, let's move on to module 4.
All right. So I'm gonna, and again, as Brandon said, we're touching on examples of how the modules flow. Certainly, if you would like to see a little more of how the modules are laid out, feel free to send me a email, and we'll give you the email after this presentation. You can have access to that. But or if you have D2L as your platform, I'd be happy to enroll you in our course so you can take it yourself as well. So here's an example of the content that we would use for module 4, which is integrity in society. And you can see there's 3 different screenshots here. There is for those of you aware of baseball and sports, and there's almost always some cheating scandal when it comes to athletics, you know, or even with the Olympics. We saw some issues, some concerns there. With baseball, this was the example we used a couple years ago about the just cheating during a baseball game and the headlines that caught. And then you may be aware, we've also had some actors and actresses who have had used money to buy their students' ability to get into prestigious universities. And that's something that's been interesting to talk about, integrity. What does that look like in a global manner? Then, of course, we have this report here from Gallup regarding, you know, the integrity of media. And we kind of talk about why is it important, which fields, which examples of integrity are critical for students and for our society. If we don't trust the engineers that built the bridge, are we going to trust driving on the bridge? And those are really important, that they have integrity and that they maintain it. So using this module 4 just kind of ties it together, that this is not just Michigan State University that has these high standards, but it does impact our society at large. And then I really like this quote from Dan Ariely. If you haven't read anything from Dan Ariely, I think he'd be a great person to add to your reading list. And this quote here, in a world where everyone is behaving honestly, any dishonesty constitutes as a big infraction. But that's not necessarily the world that we live in, right? But in a world where many people are behaving dishonestly, and I'm talking our politicians, I'm talking our global leaders, and if they're behaving dishonestly, and the news is filled with stories of their infractions, even big infractions can feel small to the perpetrator. So in a sense, a student may feel, since the United States president is behaving this way, and any president, I mean, we could point to examples of any leader, say they don't have integrity. So if I cheat over here in my little class, it's really not that big of a deal because it's not as bad as this situation, or how global leaders have handled these type of things. So it's kind of a fascinating comic theory, and Dan Ariely's done a lot of great research on behavioral economics. So another example with Module 6, as Brandon talked about, it won't happen again. You know, we talk about, well, how do we help our students? As Brandon said, you know, most students don't, my words, they don't wake up thinking, hey, I want to take advantage of cheating. I want to steal this information. I want to be dishonest. That's typically not the way they're approaching it. It's more of a external factor as time management. You know, they're stressed about getting their assignments done. Maybe there's a death in the family. Maybe they're having mental health issues, anxiety, depression, things that they're wrestling with. And so we talked about the different community resources that we have at the university. And this is one way that we can support the student. We know, you know, most students that are going through this course, it's a mistake, and that they would love to take back. And we know that there are things that put them in this corner that made them feel I had no other choice but to cheat. And that's very unfortunate. These are different community resources that we offer. The Writing Center, CAPS, which is our counseling and psychological services. We also explain how to talk to a professor. If you have issues with your professor, how do you speak with your instructor? And we also have clips. You know, our famous American actor here, Will Smith, talks about fault versus responsibility. And we've also piloted the Flipgrid, which is through Microsoft. Microsoft? Or is that Google?
Google.
Google, thank you. Flipgrid is a Google platform where students can put Post-its on the wall and say, this is how I felt, or they can respond, and it kind of builds into the community we're trying to develop there too. So those are things that we put in place to say, okay, you made these mistakes, you understand why mistakes are not welcome at our university, and here's how you can avoid it in the future. So, Brandon, this is you.
So I talked about how there are 6 sort of quizzes and assignments. These are the checkpoints that students are going through in order to finish the course. So they will go in and they will take all of this content in, we hope, and then will be quizzed or have to apply what they've learned in that particular module through this assignment. So the quiz that occurs at the end of each module is in the case study format. So basically, we will give an example of a student who has maybe plagiarized, and then give them an opportunity to pick which particular principle from the academic integrity policy, the policy of scholarship grade, and select which one that is. So that is how they're getting to that kind of knowledge of the policies more specifically. Another example is having them write some short narrative papers. So we used the phrase "see what had happened was" as a way to have them think about what were the things that were leading up to this violation, right? Was it poor time management? Was it not feeling like they were belonging and just could kind of phone it in order to get it done? Just to start getting those gears turning about their role and their value in this particular infraction. And then, as Jake mentioned, the Flipgrid videos allows the students to record themselves, post on a wall, and be able to see some different recordings. So again, they don't feel like they're just kind of clicking through a course, but that, you know, there are people who are wanting to watch and listen to them. And it also requires that they put a little bit more effort into it as well. So those are some of the general assignment types that we use. We've gotten really good feedback about this course. It is, in both Jake and my experience, relatively unique and something that existed before we did at Michigan State, but that we're really proud of to continue to further. So we wanted to share some of the quotes that we've gotten from students. So I will pick just one that says, my understanding of ethical behavior has changed from this course. I was not even aware of some of the ways plagiarism can be produced. I'm glad I've taken this course because I learned some facts about plagiarism that I did not know before. I'm now more careful about how to cite sources and quote someone else's ideas and words. I knew I had to quote and cite someone else's words, but I wasn't sure about citing or quoting somebody else's ideas before this course. I am aware of what is common knowledge and what is not now. I think that's really all we can ask for, right? Is that they have now taken some tangible skills and knowledge of how to actually cite as it relates to plagiarism, but we also get a sense that they're thinking through, you know, how their own behavior has changed and what is considered ethical. Now, we wanted to assess beyond just asking students for some of that qualitative feedback around what, you know, learning is actually occurring. So we do that with some of the quizzes and activities that we in the office will pull through and understand. But we're also using a pre, post, and 6 month after survey that is created in what we use as Qualtrics to be able to gather data. We look at some of the demographic information of students and make sure that the questions that we are asking are directly tied to the learning outcomes. So it will ask questions around the scholastic dishonesty scale and an attitudes assessment. So it starts to get at, do students think what they did in order to end up in this course is in fact academic dishonesty? Then we look at that before they take the course, after they've taken the course, and then 6 months after they've taken the course, in order to see if there really has been learning or to what effect this course is hitting the learning outcomes that we were hoping it would.
So I think there's a lot that we've learned from this, and certainly I've seen some questions coming up in the chat, so I want to make sure that we will address those and come back to those as well. But just some things that Brandon and I have learned about this transition is, first, it's like everything else, it's difficult to complete initiatives in the middle of a global pandemic. So we were in the middle of this project and we had aspirations to complete this work last fall, right? 2020, and it just, time and priorities and different things kept getting in the way of updating this course information. So certainly that's something that was really a challenge for us as well, is getting this work done while managing our other responsibilities during the COVID pandemic. So I think also with the preventative and Brandon, feel free to jump in, preventative and reactive, I think there's always there's a way that we want to be able to take what we've done for this reactive course for our students and somehow use this information and share it broadly with students prior to a violation, you know, and I think some of this content is exciting and I think really does grab at students and helps them reflect on their views of academic integrity. And I think we want to see how can we parcel out these modules as possibly a proactive preventative measure for our university as in maintaining that academic integrity piece, rather than catching them, but how do we educate them on the front end? We've also, go ahead, Brandon, or I could keep going too.
Why don't you take multiple motivations and then I'll take the rest?
Awesome. The multiple motivations too is, and we've kind of said this throughout the presentation, is there's not one motivation for students who are cheating or plagiarizing. It's never, and like I've said before, it's not, we don't find students that wake up in the morning and say, I want to cheat today. We believe in the humanity of our students. We believe that they are juggling their own responsibilities. They maybe have a crisis at home, whether it's health related or family related, or maybe they're just ran out of time, or it's a time management issue, or they really don't care for their professor, their instructor. They don't like the layout of the course, that maybe they don't understand. You know, if you put me in the middle of a chemistry course or in the middle of calculus, I wouldn't even know where to start, you know, and so it's finding that bit of where the student belongs and making sure that they're in the appropriate course. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves just scrambling and trying to figure out an answer rather than doing it the right way. So I think students have multiple motivations, and I think it's really important to, or maybe they have pressure from their parents or their family member or someone that's paying for their scholarship, that they have to keep a certain grade in order to keep a certain scholarship. They are, that's their external motivation. And those are things that we try to help students parcel out. Well, what is making you make this decision against your own personal integrity? And that's something that we really try to empathize, sympathize, or just kind of support them in learning and reflecting on it. So, all right.
When we were developing the course, we wanted it to be applicable to different majors, academic experiences, and different violations. So as you can see through our discussion of the individual modules, we didn't just make it so that a student who is a computer science student who may have copied code from another student just has the second module, which covers copying code, right? We went through and made the decision quite intentionally that we wanted students to be able to use this opportunity to gather as much information as we could around plagiarism, around improper collaboration, all of those different pieces that aligned with our larger policy, and take them with them. So we're pretty proud that the course covers as much as it does and is relatively universal. From an assessment considerations perspective, we do use Qualtrics, but we wanted to make sure that we could share with upper administration, our dean, as well as others who have a vested interest in helping to create a community around promoting academic integrity, that this course was in fact working, and pull some of those individual stories from students about the change that they've seen in themselves. Earlier iterations didn't use what we would consider as inclusive language. They would refer to students as cheaters. That was a decision that we made to remove that type of language in order to ensure that students knew that they were still respected by us despite this intentional or unintentional situation, and that they could see some of themselves and their different identities represented in the types of videos and content that we were creating. And then lastly, we really were focused on accessibility. So trying to ensure that we were using closed captioning, that we were using best practices in order to address our content in a way that it could be accessed by people of all different abilities.
So at this point, certainly we wanted to take your questions. I think one thing that we had a couple that came in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and tackle those, and then we can divert back to Marta for processing other questions that may come in. But please feel free to send in your questions, any thoughts or follow-up you want to have. So the one question that I saw that I really feel bad that we didn't cover was what happens if the student doesn't pass the course. So when we have the intervention course and the student is going through the course, if they don't reach that 80%, they then are referred to our office. And so there's I'll call it extra credit, but I'll just take number one, as an administrator, I'm going to take a look at why they didn't pass, and if they were just clicking and not actually taking the course, I will require them to come meet with me in my office or with a Zoom meeting just to kind of have a face-to-face conversation. Or if it truly was, they were not taking the content to heart or understanding the content, then we would tailor a reflection assignment or some sort of, this is really is case by case, depending on the situation. Most students pass. I mean, we're talking 96, 97% pass. It's not difficult content. My opinion, we're not asking them to do actual citations, but just what are they learning from these? And many of them are many of the questions are very reflection based. So it's hard to not pass, in my opinion. But yes, like I said, if they don't pass, then we do have an additional reflection assignment, or they have to come meet with the Dean of Students Office, our office, for a further discussion about their approach to learning. So the other question I saw is the prevention question. What are things that we can do when it comes to online learning and the prevention? I think many of this information should be shared with students when they come through the orientation process. We have a couple modules that we do share with our orientation office that works with students that are coming to the university. As Brandon and I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is students being unaware of what are the community expectations, and then the why, because I think the why is critical too. So how and why do we expect this from our students, and why do we expect this from our community? I think that's really important when it comes to prevention information. I think another great way of prevention is adding it to the syllabus, making sure the language is in the syllabus, making sure that all instructors have the model language for academic integrity and what it means to cheat, plagiarize, and have that frank conversation up front. Unfortunately, a lot of this conversation is saved for that very first day of class and then never spoken about again. And that's something that we in our office really encourage our instructors and our faculty members to talk about this constantly. Make it part of your regular routine conversation. I know that some institutions here in America and some colleges, some programs do require students to sign off on a pledge before they take the exam. And a lot of research shows that even just sharing the pledge, or if you have an honor code statement for your institution, just having those things up front can significantly decrease the situations of students cheating or whatnot. So that's really, I think, preventative actions that institutions can take. I know that we also have ICAI, which again is the International Center for Academic Integrity. They have an annual day of action, an International Day of Action, and that is in October 20th. And that's a day that universities, schools across the globe take an opportunity to take a stand against contract cheating. We at Michigan State University are using that day to really just talk about all things academic integrity and the issues that contract cheating does cause our learning and our industry of higher education. So, Brandon, did you have any other thoughts about prevention?
I was going to mention something about contract cheating, so I'm glad you brought it up. So in terms of being able to address contract cheating as a preventative measure, we often see, students who use Chegg or Course Hero, which tend to be two of the most popular kind of online databases. We encourage, faculty or TAs to have conversations around what is appropriate and what is not when it comes to using those websites, right? They are used in different majors for a variety of different things, but often students, don't fully realize that, using those websites or those shared things are considered cheating. So I think preventative, if we can start to have more of a conversation around some of those contract cheating methods, that it'll only better our students' experiences and what they're learning.
And I see this question came in from the chat from Ibrahim. Thank you so much for this question here. I'm going to read it. It says, thank you very much for this excellent presentation. I'm aware that it is quite a complicated issue, but still would like to hear your opinion regarding this duality. And I think I love this. Thank you so much for the philosophical conversation here. The question is, do you think in general that academic integrity is more related to ethical principles stemming from individual societal credentials or a lack of discipline imposed by the institutions? And I think it's both. I don't think you can have either one. I have a hard time, and maybe that's my perspective of the duality. I really do think it's both. Students, if there's an opportunity, students will take it. So if the university does not impose a discipline or a model, students will utilize the opportunity to act without ethics, to act without integrity. And I do think it's important as leaders and as institutions that we model and show what it does mean to act with integrity and ethics. I think a lot of the violations stem from ignorance or not understanding or knowing what those standards are. And I also think it's critical that when we talk about educating the population, when we talk about educating the future of our society, we really do uphold those standards, because regardless of what career, what steps individuals take for the workforce, or if they're, depending on what they're going to do as a career, there's always going to be standards. And so the duality, I think, and Brandon, jump in if you want, but there's the personal integrity, and then we have the community integrity, right? And so it's you as a person, if you're going to say, I'm part of this community of learners, which may be the university, it may be in the office that you work in, that you agree with those integrity pieces. And if you don't believe it's in the credentialing, then you're in the wrong place. And you need to find a place where you do agree with the credentialing and the standards. And I think that's really what's important too, is you make the mention here, but I do think it's the, yes, there's credentialing, but that's the community you signed up for, you know, so it's the personal integrity and the community integrity. So find another place, you know, and obviously choices are not equitable for all people. So I think that does increase it does incur a great question, you know, like, how do we make it more equitable? How do we make this more equal? Because not all students can say, I don't want to go here. I'd rather go here where I agree with their standards or how they manage. So Brandon, do you have any? That's a great question.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. One of the first things that I think Jake and I talked about was that academic integrity is a social construct, which is really, you know, it's still early here in Pennsylvania, but it really is a social construct, right? We've developed and created these standards and norms, and just because it is a social construct does not mean that it is not important or that it should not be enforced, but it means different things to a variety of different people. So that second piece, to your question, Ibrahim, around is it a lack of discipline? I don't think it's a lack of discipline. I think it's a lack of proactive education. And I don't think that it should fully be on post-secondary institutions to promote academic integrity. Largely here in the States, I think we should be promoting, plagiarism, not promoting plagiarism, promoting the different citing sources, all of those different pieces that students are almost expected to know when they get to Michigan State or any other institution that the vast majority don't fully understand. So I think that we need to turn the mirror kind of back on ourselves and recognize that it is a social construct, define it more intentionally for our students, and work with our partners in secondary education, in our first year seminars, in orientation, and all of those different areas to address it more concretely.
I think we have another question in the chat, and it's in Ukrainian from Miss Natalia, but I will translate it for you in the chat. So do you have any public discussions or debates of cases of academic integrity violation? And if so, are the names, student's name and the instructor's name mentioned in the discussions, and who might be present at such a discussion or debates, if you have to?
Can you clarify for me the discussion debates? Are we talking about like there's a violation and there's a hearing per se?
Yeah. I think so. I think that we Ms. Natalia meant hearings and that just public discussion with the students or with the faculty. Is it possible?
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to have it and to mention the names?
Yeah, so this that's a great question. So if let's say there's a report and let's say it's about cheating. There's an example. If a student is looking over their neighbor's shoulder to get exam answers while they're taking an exam, and the professor submits a report and says this student was cheating on the exam, the student has the right to say, no, I want a public discussion about this. I want a hearing about this. I want to be able to contest this allegation. And so when we have these public hearings, it's really private hearing. They're not public. They're private hearings, and faculty member has to prove with the preponderance of the evidence that there was a violation. But these hearing boards are made up of 3 faculty members and 2 students. So in a way it is public because it is part of the community coming to the hearing And they get to hear both sides. They get to hear from the student and they get to hear from the faculty member. And they, as a board, make a decision of whether or not the student is responsible or if the decision is overturned. Does that kind of answer that question, Marta?
I believe so. Пані Наталя, пані Наталя Отенко, якщо можливо,
Так, thank you.
сказати. Thank you, Jake and Brandon. And we still have a couple of minutes, so I'll go through just a couple of questions we got in the registration form from our participants. And one of them is, what are the requirements, and if there are any, for the faculty who are delivering academic integrity course?
So the requirement for the faculty who are facilitating the course?
Yes.
Yeah, so with Brandon and I being I would call we're administrators that are administering the course. The requirements are, we've been received our master's degree in higher education, that we are understanding of student development theories. And so those are kind of the expectations that we have as far as our credentials go. But certainly as we process these courses, the requirements are, that the students have the opportunity to file any complaints or grievances against us, or they could certainly utilize the grievance process at the university if they feel that there's not a fair process there. The other thing that we have at Michigan State University is a code of teaching responsibility. This is a responsibility for all faculty members, not just ones that are doing this course, but any course that are teaching, whether it's economics or if it's in mathematics or in chemistry. They all have a code of teaching responsibility, which means they have to have a syllabus. Syllabus must be thorough. They must maintain the integrity of scholarship and grades. They must make sure that they're accessible to students with office hours. So there's different things in that code of teaching responsibility that all faculty members must abide by. And then we do have a process if the student feels that instructors are not complying with that. And then they go through that process.
Thank you so much, Jake, for the answer. We have a question here in the chat from Valeria Justiniuk. Is it possible to take this course and share it with interested students?
Yes, certainly you can take it. I'd be happy, especially if you have access to D2L, which is the platform that we use. Otherwise, I'd be happy to email you a PDF of the slides that we've worked on and created. We're happy to share, certainly. Yes, what I would need is an email. And I don't know, Marta, I saw a couple in the chat. I'm just wondering if you would be able to email me a list of those that want the information, if that works, just because some I thought were in Ukrainian. I thought it would be easiest if you took the chat and then I could take the emails from you at a later date and I can send the PDF out, if that works.
Okay, sure. Then at the end of the session, I'll just announce this one more time. Probably the participants just hear it through the interpretation, but I'll emphasize it one more time. And if I receive the emails, I will send over them to you. We already have some emails people are sending, so I'll share definitely them with you. Okay, and we have another question from Miss Natalia Vivcharek. Do you use such a term as self-plagiarism when the student just uses the previous work and submits it as new? For example, when you have a term paper and it turns into a bachelor's paper, do you have it and how you deal with that?
Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, we do hold students accountable for self-plagiarism. Certainly, it's it's a form of academic dishonesty that does not get talked a lot about. And I think really when I talk to students about self-plagiarism, it's hard. It's really hard for students to understand because it's their work. So why can't they use it? You know, and I really like to frame it as you are taking a course with an instructor who is charged with teaching you about chemistry 100, whatever the course is about chemistry. And if you use work from chemistry 50 or whatever you call it in a different chemistry course in chemistry 100, it is not meeting standards or the expectation that the faculty member from the first day to the last day, you know, managing what you as a student are learning. So it is difficult, but yes, it is a violation. And I will say some instructors, and I think this is an academic freedom piece, some instructors, some professors don't believe in self-plagiarism and they won't hold the students accountable. So it goes back to the instructors have the right to decide what is a violation when they submit it.
Thank you so much for the answer. And I think we have time for one more question. If there is someone from the audience who would like to ask, please feel free. We still have 3 minutes. Okay, so yeah, we have a question from Miss Valentina Kupko. What punishment do you use to those students who use, let's say, the paper that they ordered from some agency, like who resorted to contract cheating?
That's a great question. Generally, with those, if it's an egregious case or the college requests additional sanctions, generally what we'll do is we'll put them on a university probational status. What that means is they are, if there's any other infraction, whether it's involves academics or not, if it's another issue, you know, another violation, they will be removed from the university. So again, we put them on that probationary status more as an intervention, also an opportunity for them to reflect on what happened, why they bought the paper, because that would be considered egregious. And then really, I personally like to dive into, is this fair? Why do you as a student who has the money and other students who don't, and why is this an issue? And is that equitable? So those kind of, we don't suspend people right away. We don't expel them right away. There's an opportunity for them to learn from this and such, and that would be more of a probationary status of what takes place, and we manage that on our database in our office. Great question.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Brandon, for your generous and very rich input. I think that it was very beneficial for our participants. And since in Ukraine, we don't have the exact analogs of such a course that you are presenting, I think our participants could have very large intake from your presentation and probably use what you have instructed us on in their practice and on their campus. I'll just switch into Ukrainian for a couple of final remarks. Дуже дякуємо всім, що ви доєдналися сьогодні до нас. Дякуємо тим, хто надіслали свої імейли. Ми обов'язково їх передамо Джейку та Брендону, і також надішлемо вам презентації з сьогоднішньої події. Також хочемо сказати про те, що сьогодні Джейк і Брендон згадували про День боротьби із замовними роботами, contract cheating. І насправді ми цього року готуємо кілька заходів, які будуть присвячені цій темі, оскільки вона доволі чутлива, і хоча в Україні ми знаємо, що є випадки, коли звертаються до замовлення робіт, але про це не так голосно говорять, тому ми спробуємо почати розмови довкола цієї теми. Тому дякуємо всім. Залишайтеся на зв'язку з нами через нашу Фейсбук-сторінку. Про всі наші події ми будемо повідомляти там. І дякуємо ще раз за увагу до теми академічної доброчесності і за те, що сьогодні були з нами. Колеги, Женя, Настя, чи ви можете щось додати? Добре. Тому дякуємо вам і до нових зустрічей на наступних вебінарах.
Дякуємо доповідачам, до побачення.
А також дякуємо нашій перекладачці пані Інні, завдяки якій Джейк і Брендон могли до вас говорити українською мовою.